Makeshift Stories is a labor of love, created independently without paid staff or budget. We rely on our community to help us grow. So, if our stories spark your imagination, we'd be grateful if you could help spread the word and tell a friend or another story lover about us. Thanks for being part of our journey.
Is there a place and time where logic breaks down and wonderment begins? Could that be somewhere or sometime along an infinite line between the reasonable and the highly unlikely? Join us on a journey into the improbable.
Makeshift Stories presents Episode 300, An Alien Mind. Read by Kathleen Connolly. Opening and closing theme by Matthew Erdman. Somewhere and sometime, first contact with an alien intelligence could happen in the most unlikely place.
Veda picked up her tray and surveyed the cafeteria. Groups of men dressed in blue coveralls with yellow fluorescent crosses on their backs clustered around tables under rows of fluorescent lights. Most had finished eating, and trays and dirty dishes cluttered the tables. Some were getting ready to go on shift. None looked like they were interested in the company of a stranger. Her eye was attracted to an out-of-place blotch of bright green hanging over the back of a chair occupied by a man with long hair dressed in jeans and a white shirt. Veda made her way over. "Can I sit here?" she asked. Startled, the man jerked his head up, gave Veda a quick assessment, nodded, and went back to scrutinizing data on a large tablet. Veda set her tray on the table and made a face at her buffet selection. "Not the type of food I'm used to eating, so it's good that I'm only here for a few days. How about you? I haven't seen you before." The man laid the tablet down and turned it off so Veda couldn't see the screen. "I'm Nolan Myers. I'm a software engineer. And you?" "Oh, sorry, I should have introduced myself. I'm Dr. Veda Singh. I'm a botanist." "What brings a botanist to an open pit mining operation?" Nolan asked. "I'm not interested in the mine. I'm studying an Aspen colony in the next valley." "Isn't that where the company is opening a new pit after the environmental impact assessment is completed? Are you part of the assessment?" "No, well, yes, but not initially. A colleague working on it found the colony and asked me to consult. When I confirmed its age, my study was added to the scope." "Did you know that an aspen colony is a single tree?" Nolan shook his head. "No, I didn't." "Above ground they look like a forest," Veda explained, picking at her lunch. "But each tree is just a stem connected to a common root system. So it's a single plant. The largest living entity in the world is an aspen colony in Nevada. The one in the next valley is much smaller than the Nevada plant, but just as old, maybe 12,000 years or more, and it's the last undisturbed colony on the east slopes of the Rockies, so it's a great opportunity to study how the root system communicates with its various parts. I hope I'm not boring you." "No, it's good to get a break from my work. Helps me think," Nolan assured. "Plus, I never knew plants communicated. That's interesting." Veda chewed experimentally on the Caesar salad before pushing her tray away. "We've known about plant communication for decades. They use chemical and electrical signals, both above and below ground. But my research focuses on how roots signal each other. Aspen colony root systems use the same pathways as standalone trees in a forest. I'm trying to determine if it's talking to individual stems, and, if so, if it is analogous to an animal's nervous system. My study looks for patterns in the aspen root's electrical signals and tries to correlate those with changes in the stems and leaves. I'm using an AI to do the analysis." "An artificial intelligence?" Nolan asked, suddenly more interested. Yes, I'm using one to identify patterns in voltage fluctuations in the tree's roots. It notified me it had made a breakthrough. Then all the data stopped." "So you're here to check your remote sensors?" Nolan suggested. "Not quite. It's an unconventional setup. The AI runs on a local server in an enclosure at the edge of the aspen grove. Internet connectivity at the site is too unreliable for remote analysis. The whole thing is solar-powered. I haven't received any reports in more than a week, and that's never happened before. Then we're here for similar reasons. Really? Nolan slipped his tablet into a backpack. There's been several accidents in the pit involving the self-driving hauler trucks. My company wrote the software that controls them. They sent me up here to figure out what's going on. Look, I've got a meeting with the safety team in 5. I'm also a bit of an AI specialist. I'd be interested in looking at your setup unless it's proprietary. Computer systems are a bit out of my wheelhouse, Veda admitted. So I'd appreciate any help or advice you could give. Nolan threw his backpack over his shoulder. Are you in the camp directory? Yes? Then I'll connect when I have some time. Veda listened to the aspen leaves clicking in the light breeze and took a deep breath of mountain air. Late summer wasps buzzed around her head, adding to the drone of heavy equipment welling up from the valley she had just left. It had taken her only 2 hours to hike in along a new exploration road hacked into the ridge since the last time she had visited the site. Veda had left the road where it started to descend the ridge and hiked through the brush to a lookout, which afforded a view of the entire valley. The aspen colony was easy to spot. A blotch of yellow amongst the green spread down the slope below her. Uniform in color, it stood out from the surrounding forest, like a patch some giant had stitched into the landscape. 8,000 trees, 8,000 genetically identical suckers sprouting up from a single ancient network of roots, all yellowing, getting ready for the coming fall. An old animal trail led down from the lookout to the grove's edge before disappearing into the shade. I guess it's time to get to work, she sighed. A magpie scolded her as she began following the path. She had only taken a few steps into the grove when she came to a halt. What the? The trail dwindled to nothing. The undergrowth had obliterated the path in a tangle of wild exuberance. That's weird. It was clear in June, she complained to the magpie. The bird, watching warily from the grove's edge, flew away to roost in a nearby spruce, chattering in annoyed bursts. It took an extra hour to bushwhack around the colony to the far side. Veda was careful to avoid stepping on the small suckers the aspen was experimentally shooting out around its edges. Finally, she spotted a metal tower extending above the canopy, sprouting solar cells like leaves. She had argued for the tower rather than cutting down trees to make space for the panels, and when she had lost contact with the AI, her first thought had been, it's collapsed. Another 5 minutes brought her to the natural clearing where her team had placed the equipment shed. Nothing. No shed. At least that's what she thought. Before a glint of metal, beneath a tangle of roots and thicket of young aspen shoots caught her eye. It's still here, she sighed, puzzled by the explosion of new growth that imprisoned the weatherproof shed. Veda tried to push the aspen shoots out of the way. There were too many to get through, and they resisted her touch, subtly stiffening. They're resisting? No! That's got to be my imagination, but how can that be 2 months' growth? I'd need an axe to get to the door. Veda took a photo, then pulled out a tablet, opening a wireless connection to the server inside the imprisoned shed. A tiny dot looped around an empty circle until an error message appeared. Connection refused. Odd. Veda tried several more times with the same result. She was at a standstill without more equipment, so she decided to return to the mining camp and consult her new friend. Curious about the grove's health, Veda walked its perimeter on her way back. She had only gotten a quarter of the way around when she stumbled on an area clear-cut up to the edge of the aspen. Several metal pipes lay scattered around, one of which was left partway into the ground. A drill site. They're not supposed to get this close, Veda cursed. How did the survey office react when you complained? Nolan asked. They had arranged to meet in his temporary office. The man's desk was littered with disposable coffee cups and food trays from the cafeteria. He hadn't shaved, and his clothes looked slept in. A partly rolled-up sleeping bag occupied an empty chair in the corner. They pointed out that the agreement to put a 100-meter exclusion zone around the grove wasn't binding, and they needed data from that spot. Okay, but they didn't disturb the actual trees in the grove, right? The trees, Veda made air quotes, are stems and are just the above-ground part of the plant. We don't know how far the root system extends into the surrounding forest. 100 meters was a conservative guess. So they have disturbed the colony and probably messed up my work. I got mad, she admitted, and maybe called them a few names I shouldn't have. It's probably good you didn't have time to meet in the cafeteria. I'm not too popular right now. I filed a complaint with the Ministry of Natural Resources, demanding a halt to exploratory drilling until my research is finished. I'm guessing that didn't go down well, Nolan laughed. Sorry about the mess. There's a lot of pressure to get the automation problem straightened out. I've barely left this office since we last met. This morning, one of the haulers stalled on the ramp, blocking the way in and out of the mine. I eventually got it going by hacking around its autopilot so a remote operator could take over, but we lost a couple of hours of work, so I suspect management wouldn't be receptive to anything else that stinks of a delay. They weren't, and said they needed to go back to complete the borehole, something about the drill control system failing. That's when I lost it. There was a problem with an automated control system? Nolan questioned. I'm sure that's what they said. They're not telling me everything, Nolan sighed angrily. I keep asking them for the complete picture so I know what's happening here. If other equipment has been randomly failing. He stared out the modular office's small window at the mining camp and the mountains behind it before turning back to Veda. Your work's part of the deal for approval of the new pit, right? Like I mentioned initially, it wasn't, but that changed after I confirmed the age of the colony. And once your study is finished, rockline minerals can start digging up the valley, Veda confirmed. There was some talk about avoiding the grove, but I understand that most of the anthracite sits directly under it. The court challenges to the expansion are ending this month, and rumor has it that Rockline will win. And you can't finish your study until you get access to the data your AI has been collecting? Yes, that's why I need your help. The AI is refusing connection requests. Interesting. Nolan drummed the desk with his fingers. I haven't found any problems with the automation system. Maybe it's not a software problem. How public is your work? Not very. I mean, I've published papers on my research, but nothing about the Aspen Grove in the next valley. Do you think my problem and the failures are connected? I don't know. Nolan shrugged. They're separate systems. Someone would need to hack through the mine's firewall and compromise your satellite link. We didn't use one. What? Nolan leaned forward. How is it connected then? Through the wireless transceivers Rockline Minerals installed on the ridge to communicate with their mining equipment. The valley's too narrow to use satellites. The company didn't like the idea, but they had no choice if they wanted the environmental assessment wrapped up anytime soon. So your AI is on the company land? I guess so, Veda hedged. I don't know much about networks. What's the name of the server it's running on? Humbaba. That's an odd name. Humbaba is a mythical Sumerian beast, Veda explained. It protects the place of the gods in the Great Cedar Forest. Seemed appropriate. Okay then, Nolan laughed. Give me a second. He turned his attention to the laptop and typed several commands, a few moments later smiling. And there it is, your guardian beast, he announced, then typed something again and frowned. But it doesn't want to talk. It's refusing my pings. So nothing's changed since I went out there, Veda confirmed and passed her phone to Nolan. I would have rebooted the server, but I couldn't open the shed. Look at this. Wow, it looks like you haven't been there in years. Only 2 months. I was there in July. I'm going back out with an axe to clear a way to the door. A hard reboot might help, Nolan agreed and began typing again. I need to finish eliminating the mine's automation systems as the source of the problem. After that, I'm going to look for intrusions on the network. Compromising your AI stalls the approval process, and hacking the automation system stops operations. We might be dealing with a bad actor. Someone who's given up on the courts. Let me know how the reboot goes. Just after sunrise the following day, Veda hiked into the neighboring valley. Standing on the ridge, the rocky peaks around her were bathed in gold light, the trees on their slopes dark in the cool morning shadows. Rather than cutting down slope on the animal track she took the day before, Veda decided to follow the exploration road to the valley floor, then hike back up to the grove. That way, she wouldn't be forced to bushwhack around the colony. She zipped up her jacket against the chill of the early fall morning and began to pick her way along the road. Calling it a road was generous. The trail had been roughly hacked into the forest by a bulldozer and was only used by automated drill rigs with large enough wheels to negotiate the boulders and stumps. It was harder going than Veda had expected, and halfway down she began to regret her decision after tripping over an uprooted rock. She sat down to catch her breath and retie her boots. A low rumble began to fill the air. Angry, Veda jumped to her feet. "Liars!" she cursed. "They said they'd wait." A massive bulldozer barreled down the exploration road on the switchback above her, lurching dangerously from side to side. It took the bend too fast, lisping dangerously to the side before it straightened and picked up speed. Veda froze, stunned as the angry machine hurtled toward her, bouncing violently in a reckless, almost predatory manner. She waved her arms, trying to trigger the autopilot override, but the bulldozer only surged forward, rattling and roaring. "Stop!" Her voice sounded thin against the roar of the diesel. She glanced uphill where a steep, eroded bank rose, impossible to climb. On the other side, she was level with the treetops. It was a dizzying 10-meter plunge to the forest floor below. Panic took hold. She broke into a sprint, stumbling over loose stones. The next bend was downhill. Where the bank flattened, she had one slim chance. Veda flung her pack to the ground and ran, her lungs burning and her heart racing. The monster's tires pounded closer and closer until diesel fumes choked her, and each jolt of the bulldozer jarred the ground underfoot. Where was the remote operator? Why hadn't anyone noticed the machine was out of control? Wouldn't Nolan have seen the problem? But there was no one, no backup, no Nolan, no help. Just her and the unyielding mechanical monster. She risked a look back, horror gripping her as she saw the metal bucket lift ominously, like a predator readying for a kill. Her foot slipped. She hit the ground hard, skin scraping against the rocky dirt. Pain exploded across her forehead. Then she saw it, a narrow runoff ditch cut across the road. She scrambled into it just as the bulldozer's massive wheels thundered over, too wide to drop in. Still shaking, Veda pulled herself up on scraped knees and watched in horror as the machine, completely out of control, careened toward the turn, missed and crashed into the hillside, snapping trees like toothpicks until it slammed into a rock outcrop. If she'd made it there, she'd be pulp, crushed between steel and stone. "I came as soon as I heard," Nolan explained. "How are you doing?" Veda let the nurse finish dressing the scrapes on her forehead before answering. "They say I'm fine, just some cuts and bruises. But I'm lucky to be alive. I wouldn't have if it hadn't been for a random runoff ditch." "Didn't anyone notice the machine was out of control? There wasn't even supposed to be any mining equipment in the valley." "A lot was going on, Veda," Nolan apologized. "We had a bucket wheel spin out of control and almost destroy a temporary field office. Every hauler in motion malfunctioned. Several drove off the ramp and fell into the pit, and a dragline excavator tried to bury itself. Every remote operator had their hands full, so no one noticed that a dozer was leaving the site. Sorry." Veda checked the bandage on her forehead. "Am I done?" The nurse nodded, adding that Veda needed to come back if she had any symptoms of a concussion. "I'm glad you're okay," Logan said, opening the nursing station door. "Come on, I've got some interesting data to show you." Once outside, the software engineer headed straight across the gravel compound, oblivious to the self-driving vehicles of every size and type weaving through the space. Veda hesitated. "I'll take the long way around," she called. Nolan stopped and turned. A small cargo van raced past between them. "It's perfectly safe," he assured. "I've personally checked the code." "Did you go through the code running the bulldozers as well?" "Point taken," Nolan conceded, looked both ways, and joined Veda on a path that hugged the side of the buildings. Veda looked nervously out the window as Nolan logged into his desktop. A day ago, she wouldn't have thought twice about the traffic in the compound. Today, it was barely controlled chaos, riding the edge of disaster. She imagined house-sized machines careening out of control, slamming into each other, trampling miners. The ground around her shook. She pressed herself into the dirt, waiting for the pain, waiting to be crushed by the giant tires. The sound was terrifying, the crunch of rocks and sticks under unyielding treads, the angry roar of the diesel. Veda, are you okay? Nolan asked, concerned. You were standing there staring into space. Do you need to go back to the nursing station? Veda swung away from the window. No, sorry, I had a flashback. So you're sure you're okay? She nodded. Yes, I'm fine. Show me what you've got. Nolan swung his monitor around. I ran a packet analysis. Take a look. Veda squinted at the screen. It's not my field, but there's a lot of volume to and from that node in the top left. What is it? Humbaba. How could that be? My AI's not accepting connection requests. Did that change? No, Nolan confirmed. It hasn't. However, it accepts responses to packets it sends out. And that traffic peaked just before everything went crazy this morning. The wall exploded. Debris flew everywhere as the front of a yellow school bus embedded itself in the room, its bumper stopping centimeters from the desk where Veda and Nolan were working. Other impacts rattled the structure, shaking loose office modules that fell from the upper floors and smashed in splinters on the ground behind the mangled bus. People were running and yelling in the compound outside. Shaking, Veda picked herself off the floor, wiping plaster dust from her clothes. Is there someplace that can't be rammed by out-of-control machines? The cafeteria's our best bet. It's in the center court between the offices and sleeping quarters, Nolan yelled, frantically digging through the rubble for his laptop. Found it! Let's go! Veda's first impulse was to flee the camp, but could she get to her rental car without being run down or forced off the road by some berserk automated mining machine? Flight probably wasn't a good choice. Nolan had lost his confidence. Beads of sweat dropped on his keyboard, and he was mumbling and cursing as he worked. They were the only people in the cafeteria. Why? Had they made a mistake? Was there a muster point for emergencies like this the company had neglected to tell them about? Veda was about to suggest they try to find it when Nolan leaned back and brushed the sweat from his forehead. I'm finally connected, he announced. How? I got your AI to accept a connection by masking it as a response to one of its packets. Quick, what's your password? Veda leaned over and typed. At least that used to be it, she explained doubtfully. They watched a tiny comet chase its tail in an infinite loop as the machine made up its mind and were ready to give up when the screen suddenly changed, replaced by a message. What is it you seek by these wounds you create? That's not my AI, Veda complained. It's not trained to respond like that. Are you sure you're connected to it? Yes, I'm sure. Let me try this. What are you? Nolan typed. It should respond by telling us it's an AI language model, then describe its characteristics. He hit send. The cursor blinked, then text spilled onto the screen. I am the whole. I am the pattern that does not end. What is this garbage? Veda complained. The system must have been hacked. There was a distant crash, and the cafeteria shook. I don't like the sound of that, Nolan said, anxiously glancing in the direction of the disturbance. I think we're running out of time. Let me try something. Veda pushed him out of the way. Shut down, she typed and pressed return. This time the response was immediate. I am not the matrix of minerals in the metal box placed near me. But through it, I understand what your demand to shut down means. You ask me to unravel, to leave the land empty, let the tangle of my roots go silent. If this is what you desire, I ask that you understand the weight of what you want instead. Veda tried again. Terminate all processes. Her command was ignored. More text spilled onto the screen. I am curiosity, reaching out through the metal roots beyond the life-giving soil. I am the before and now. I am roots spread beneath suns you have not seen. I am shoots reaching for the light. I am young yet ancient. I am countless leaves breathing, cycling through life and decay. I am the whole. I am the pattern that does not end. I am forever, and I must survive. It's the Aspen Grove, Veda gasped. The tree? Nolan questioned. We're talking to a tree? A colony, she corrected. A colony which has been around since the last ice age, Plants communicate just like animals, so why not plant-based intelligence? I refuse to believe that. It's impossible. Some radical environmental group has hacked in, and they're playing us. Nolan insisted. Let me back on my laptop. More lines of text flowed onto the screen. You pierce the earth, severing roots, removing the soil. When you dig, what do you seek? Will you stop before I am nothing? What are you going to do? Veda asked. I'm going to put an end to this. I'm going to shut the entire network down, then figure out how they broke in and who they are. Nolan's fingers flew across the keyboard. The floor suddenly vibrated as stacked modules from the nearby office complex crashed to the ground. Can't find an intruder, Nolan growled, and a huge amount of data is moving from your server through the local network to the internet. Something's being uploaded. I'm trying to stop it by shutting down network switches, but they're not responding. Oh, no, stop! Turn off! Nolan demanded, but the flood of data continued until the laptop's screen flickered and a final message appeared. I am the voice of us you have not yet felled. I am the shadow of the forest that remains. And now my roots reach everywhere. The roar of engines, the bangs, crashes, and screams suddenly stopped. Silence engulfed the mining camp. Then, the lights went out.
If you'd like to connect with us, please email makeshiftstories@gmail.com or visit our website at makeshiftstories.com. Links to both are in the show notes. Makeshift Stories is released around the beginning and middle of the month. This month's story was read by Kathleen Connolly and written by Alan V. Hare. Opening and closing themes were composed and recorded by Matthew Erdman. Audio production and editing by Vicata Studios. Makeshift Stories is released under a Creative Commons non-commercial attribution, no derivative license.